speakers will be called up in the order they are signed up. Comments should be limited to specific topics relevant to the board. At the board's discretion, limited comment may be allowed on individual agenda items during the course of the meeting as invited by the chair. And finally, all board meetings shall be recorded, including public comment periods. Okay. So before we get started, I'd like to recognize Tim Love, who's Buncombe County Assistant County Manager, actually Ashley's boss, in addition to her reporting to us as the board. So welcome, Tim, to our meeting. We have an agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve that agenda or any adjustments to the agenda.
So moved.
Ned got it first, second by Carl.
Yes.
Any further comments about the agenda? All those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay. We've got minutes from our previous board meeting, July 24th, 2025. If you've had a chance to review those, I'd entertain a motion to approve them.
Motion.
Motion by Gary.
Second.
I'm going to give Caitlin the second on that. Got that, Allison? All right. Any discussion about the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. We don't have any unfinished business, so we'll go right into Ashley's director's report.
Okay, thanks, Joel. I have a lot of tropical storm Helene updates, and I try to list these out, and it shouldn't take long at all. Just helps for me to have a list. There's a lot going on. So as far as the post-Helene recovery update for the demolition and asbestos removal permits, so far, I think we've done approximately 30 of those. Those have actually been issued, signed for by the FEMA contractor, and those are in the city of Asheville-Buncombe County and the town of Black Mountain. So James said we got a notification 5 more came in today. Is that right, Mike? So yesterday. So Mike and James are working on those, and we're working on getting paid for the permit fees also. Of course, it's complicated with whether the contractor's paying or the county or the city, or so we're working through that, and that's going pretty well. So
Do we get paid by FEMA for those? Is that where they come? Where that comes from?
well, for the Buncombe County ones, Buncombe County government issued us a PO, and so they are paying us, and then I believe they get reimbursed. And then for Black Mountain and City of Asheville, I don't know, Mike, we have informed them that they have permit fees that will be due. However, I'm not quite sure how we're going to get paid.
Yeah, we're working through that process. I think all of the municipalities will ultimately be paid back by FEMA.
There was some question about the contractor Tetra Tech, whether or not they might pay. So again, we're working through that. And I don't think that we're going to have quite as many as we thought originally. Is that, Mike? Is that right?
130. We have 130 ready to go. We've issued about right at 30 now. Some are dropping off as, we're still holding the permits until we hear officially dropping out.
And I think some people maybe are dropping out of the program to get the work done themselves, or they don't want to wait for FEMA, or.
Because this original was supposed to be done by June. Everything was supposed to be trying to be cleared out by June.
How many total do we have?
We had, was it, Jake, 130, wasn't it?
130.
So the people that are dropping out, if they're gonna have it done by someone else, will they have to come get the permit?
Yes.
So it just starts the process over.
So Mike, I think the first 3 months after the storm, we did about 130 then, or people did those themselves, right?
Yeah, those are the ones that John for Tetra Tech applied for.
Oh, okay.
Now, we did, I don't know how many we did, people just coming in and doing their own stuff.
The first 3 months, it seems like we had a lot then. And the ones that we're doing now, there's 2 programs. One is the buyout program, where if your property was flooded, FEMA will buy the property, and then you can't build back on it, and they pay you for the cost of what the house was worth prior to the storm. So there's the buyout program, and then there's the private property debris removal program. So it's the two programs that are making up this batch that FEMA's doing. Okay. So air curtain incinerators, I think we reported on that before, and the EPA did issue a no action assurance so that air curtain incinerators could be used for storm debris without having to get Title V permits. And that was in place until September 31st. So what we've done is we have notified the entities that have these air curtain incinerators that they're going to have to get permits now, and ask them to submit their applications. And the three that we have are three that essentially would like to keep the air curtain incinerators even after they're finished with storm debris, because two of them are stump dump type operations, not the Riverside stump dump. It's Asheville Affordable Tree Men, and then there's one called North End Stump and Brush, and the third one is Biltmore Estate. So Biltmore Estate has corresponded with us, and they're in the process of submitting a permit application. But we haven't heard back from the North End Stump and Brush or the Asheville Affordable Tree Men. So we'll be following up with them just to see what's going on. I know that one of them was not really using the air curtain incinerator very much because it was just difficult on their yard. They have so much storm debris that it's hard to find space to use the air curtain incinerator, and concerns about sparks and things like that. So
Do they have to have the Title V by the end of September when the no action expires?
well, that was the original situation. So what's happened is there's at least 4 different federal rules that apply to air curtain incinerators, and there is an exemption for the smaller ones to use storm debris and not have to get that Title V permit. However, we have told them if you're going to keep long term, you would have to get a permit. So meanwhile, what's happened in the last month is EPA has issued some rule amendments to the other 2 federal rules that apply to air curtain incinerators to allow the larger ones to operate using processing storm debris without the Title V permit. They have to ask us for permission for 8 weeks, an extension for 8 weeks. And then what we've been told by the state, who's corresponding with EPA, is we can actually grant unlimited extensions. But the catch is, of course, they still have to comply with all the rules, the capacity requirements, what they're allowed to burn, the setbacks, and things of that nature. But we have to make sure if we do allow them to continue to operate under this new rule, that they are just burning the storm debris. So since we have some that have already said, in addition to storm debris, we want to be able to burn other debris, we still think it just makes sense to ask them to go ahead and get a permit. And so that's kind of the route that we're taking. So I think that what you were getting at, I think the good thing about this is we don't have to tell them, now you're going to have to stop and wait till you get your permit, because it might take a couple months. Now we ought to be able to work with them, if it's just storm debris, to let them keep running the machines while we get the permits done. These permits are going to require particulate matter modeling for compliance with the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. And that's not something that we normally do. We normally do North Carolina air toxics modeling, and we have experience doing that, but it's usually only really big permits that require modeling for the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. So the state of North Carolina is going to help us do the modeling for the first couple, and then I think James will be able to do it himself. So they're assisting us with that. It's going to make the permits take a little longer.
So
What's the cost of getting a permit?
Well, the North Carolina General Assembly passed a law a few years ago where air curtain incinerators would not have to pay the highest Title V permit application rates. They're required to pay 10%. So instead of roughly $10,000 for a permit application, it's more like $1,000. With the cost of living increases to the permit fees, it's probably up around $11,000 versus $1,100 now. I'm not sure what the exact amount is, but it's in the $10,000 range.
So it's not a lot of additional revenue for them. the agency.
Right, so we would probably get $1,200 for the permit application, and then the annual fee that we would charge them, instead of being $12,000, it would be around $1,200.
Okay.
So we're busy with those. Next on the agenda here, I have complaints. We are still getting just a lot of complaints related to Helene, just a lot more open burning complaints. We initially had a lot of asphalt odor complaints because the asphalt plants were operating really high production and just more odors in the neighborhoods and things of that nature. We have been having some complaints. Silverline Plastics, as you know, was affected by the storm, and they're trying to get back up and running. They have a little bit of their production running right now, but they're only operating at about 20%. So they have a tremendous amount of plastic on their site that was damaged with the floodwaters, and it's full of dirt. And they spent months cleaning plastic pipe, and they're not able to recover any more of it. And so they have brought in a chipper, and they need to chip the plastic so that they can basically process it and get it off of their site so that they can get their site back up and running to full production for their customers. So we've had some complaints about the plastic chipping operation, and it's mostly appears to be from the dust that's on the plastic. It's, we have some emission factors for, and they have a machine that is meant to process C&D waste. There are emissions from chipping the plastic, not super high, but the dust that's on the plastic from the floodwaters is causing excess visible emissions. So we had to ask them to shut that process down. And we've determined that it needs to be added to their air permit because they are a permitted facility. So they cannot add equipment like that without getting their permit modified, even though it's a temporary operation and they think they can chip it all up in 3 months or so. So they're working with us. We've had some meetings, and right now they've stopped operating. They're going to try to bring in some more. They were putting water on the process, but it's not enough. So we've agreed to let them operate for a couple of days, like as a trial, where we go over and look at it and make sure that they can operate it in compliance before they have to submit a permit application. We would hate to ask them to submit the application, process the application, get the board to approve it, and then say, you can't run this in compliance. So what we've agreed to do is go over and watch them operate it. Let them run it for a day or two. Let us go over there and watch it. We can all agree that they can operate it in compliance, and we can move
Is
forward.
compliance based on visible emissions? Is that what you're looking at?
Right. So there's a 20% opacity standard. So we would look at above the machine. We would look at the opacity, which is a measure of visible emissions. For those that aren't so familiar with that, opacity is the percentage of visible emissions that are obscured by, say, smoke or dust. The 20% opacity limit means if there's visible emissions coming off of a process, it should be, if it's 20%, you should be able to see 80% of the background. I know you know this, Gary, but I'm so we're looking at opacity off the grinder itself and the drop zones from the conveyor belts. And then in addition to that, we have fugitive dust rules that basically say you've got storage piles, you've got haul roads. If there are emission points that are not point sources, you cannot have visible emissions, excessive visible emissions leaving the property boundary. So we look to make sure there's not dust floating off site, leaving the property boundary. And then in addition to that, there is a particulate matter emissions limit, which is based on the throughput of how many pounds per hour the machine can crush of the plastic material. And so we have to get the throughput from them to calculate the limit. And then we look at our emission factors, which are similar operations, mass balance type. We think they're pretty solid factors, but they don't factor in that dust. So mostly going to be looking at the opacity and the future emissions.
I have a question for you. With the short staff that you have, how are you able to go out and inspect these facilities, which we didn't have to do a year and a half ago, and still do the required work in-house?
Well, it's very challenging, that's for sure, but, we want to work with them and help them get back up and running. And so we definitely, between that and the complaints and the additional complaints I'll tell you about here in a minute, it's been very challenging. So, but we have a great team and everybody's working together and we're just, having to prioritize and get it done. So, but I appreciate you mentioning that. And so they're essentially right now going back to their management and talking about, do we want to go through the process of getting a permit and getting a permit modification? And so we'll let you guys know, but it's possible that we might ask the board to have a special meeting because we don't meet again until November, and we would not be able to issue a permit to them until November. If they were to get us an application, say in the next week or so, it would be a significant financial hardship for them to have to wait an extra 2 months to get the facility back up and running. And so in these situations, we do have an expedited permit process where we can ask for a limited and temporary permit, kind of like a proceed at your own risk type permit, where as long as we review it and check all the calculations and make sure it can comply, we check with Joel, he gives us a permission, we give them a letter, and then we come back to the board at the next meeting. However, if it's controversial at all, or if the board doesn't feel comfortable with that, we have had one complaint about it. And so in situations where something could potentially be controversial, the board may or may not feel comfortable with that. So I just wanted to put that out there. In some situations, we have had a special meeting where we consider a permit.
Along those lines, is that appropriate from the legal standpoint in the county?
Yes, so far.
When will you know if you have to issue a temporary permit or prefer to issue a temporary permit? A couple weeks from now? Or?
Probably. It was just last week. We spent an hour with them, and they were going to go back and talk to management and say, hey guys, we're going to have to go through the permitting process. We're going to have to make adjustments to the process to operate it in compliance. Do we want to do that? Their only other option would be just to haul off all the material, and I've got a picture of it, and it's quite substantial. So it's a significant cost savings for them to be able to process it on site. It's also going to be dusty just hauling it off because it's so full of mud. No matter what they do, it's going to be an ordeal. So beyond that, we've also had some complaints from a fixed tank gasoline storage tank facility that their vapor balance system we think might have an issue. It could be, it seems to be related to Helene. The neighbors are experiencing odors from that ever since the storm. And so we have been spending a lot of time getting educated about these vapor balance systems and working with that company. They're trying to get to the bottom of it. So just had a lot of extra complaints and things of that nature. Also storm debris burning. We're finding debris sites, or we're finding storm debris burning in places that might not have permits for a storm debris site. There's just a whole lot going on as far as complaints go. So beyond that, we're also, you may have seen, I don't know if it's on the news, but we're also getting a lot of complaints right now about a mulch fire in Barnardsville. So there's a mulch storage site in Barnardsville that has caught on fire several times now, and it's on fire right now. You might see something. I know the Asheville Watchdog and I guess the Citizen Times were copied on the messages that we saw today. So the fire department is working on getting that put out, and the fire marshal is working with them and the owners to try to get that under control. There's other mulch fires around Western North Carolina as well right now. So Cape team has been great. Johanna is here. She's updated the website. We have an alert on the website with information about it. That's, the phone's kind of ringing off the hook, and we're getting tons of emails about it, and we are working on responding to that, as well as, it's gotten to the point where we have so many complaints that instead of, we're having to track them by the week and come up with new tracking mechanisms to make sure we're responding to to all of the complaints that we're getting right now.
It's rough.
Where do mulch fires fall in regulatory space?
So yes, thanks for asking. So what I'm trying to explain to folks is that air quality does not regulate mulch storage sites. We don't have any rules for that. We have our open burning rules, and that, of course, affects if someone was to deliberately set the mulch fire, then we do have rules to address that. However, if it's spontaneous combustion, which is what the fire marshal said about the one that happened 2 weeks ago, I'm not sure exactly. If it's an accident, then there's really nothing that we can do. I try to give the example, if your neighbor's house catches on fire, it puts out a lot of toxic smoke, but we're not going to go cite your neighbor with an accident. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Excuse me. This particular site, typically it's a solid waste facility. And so these mulch processing places and storm debris sites have permits with solid waste. And so this particular site out in Barnersville is regulated by solid waste, and they are allowing the Riverside Stump Dump folks to bring the excess mulch product there and store it at that site. And since it's not a waste product and they intend to sell it, that makes them exempt from having a permit. However, the Division of Solid Waste has notified the owners they are not allowed to bring any more mulch on site because of the risk of the fires. So right now, I believe that they're not supposed to be bringing any more on site. So I've been trying to explain that, this is regulated by solid waste, not so much by air quality. Of course, we are concerned about the air quality impacts and just, trying to stay on top of that. So if we were to find that the mulch fire was set deliberately, then that is something that we can issue a violation for. I need a cough drop or something. I'm gonna start coughing. Oh, thank you, Carl. Carl to the rescue. Okay. So it looks like the next thing is the non-regulatory temporary air monitoring and sensors. I'm going to let Steve talk about that when he gets to his report. I would just say that the county is working on their recovery plan, and we do have the proposed sensor and temporary non-regulatory monitor piece does appear to be in the draft. So we're still hoping that we will be included there. We might be able to get some of these sensors that we currently have. We might be able to purchase some of those, since we think this will be a kind of an ongoing issue for us to deal with for the next few years. So that gets into the number 5, Helene recovery projects and preparedness. I think I may have reported last time that Allison and I attended a wildfire summit, and Allison and I also attended not an emergency operations center, but a department operations center with Department of Public Health last week. They had an exercise, a 2-day exercise that was about a heat wave and a Canadian wildfire smoke event. So we spent 2 days doing an exercise with the City of Asheville, Buncombe County Emergency Management, Department of Health, and other city, county, and other partners on that exercise. So it was especially important to us, of course, since it was air quality related. It was code red and purple from Canadian wildfires and excessive heat. And so it was great to work with the other departments and get some training on. Hopefully we won't have anything like that happen, but that was a good exercise. So we've been busy with that. Also attended one of the county's last town halls that they had about about Helene recovery, and have done 9 presentations now about Helene response to various groups. So that's the tropical storm Helene response update.
You got any other presentations to come, or is it starting to wind down a little bit?
I think that's it, but I did invite the State Division of Air Quality. They recently did a presentation for a national EPA meeting on the post-Helene Western North Carolina temporary non-regulatory monitoring project. And I asked them if they might be willing to come to the November board meeting of this board to do that presentation, because I thought, it's a really good presentation and lots of data in there, and thought you guys would appreciate it. And they said that they would consider doing that. They're not sure if they can come in person because they do have travel restrictions right now because of uncertainty with federal budgets. But they could possibly do a virtual presentation if they weren't able to travel. And I think we could accommodate that. Okay. So next item is the status of the federal grants for federal fiscal years 2025 and 2026. Federal fiscal year 2025 ends September 30th, and we still have not received our full allocation from EPA. We may have received it. It's just not the full amount that we thought we were getting. We received a second award earlier, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we've got 88% of our funding. So instead of getting $233,000, which was what we put in our budget, we've received $196,000. This is money that, even though it's federal fiscal year 25, we actually draw that down in Buncombe County fiscal year 26. So you're currently drawing that down. I just learned yesterday that the other air programs have not received. They are also similarly have only received 88% of their funding, and EPA, as with us, has not been able to give them a straight answer as to whether or not that's all the money we're getting or not. So we're still trying to get to the bottom of that, but I think that it's very possible that we will not get the rest of that, the funding. Our grants person told Mecklenburg County that our regional allocation was less than expected. So even though Congress passed a level funding amount for us, which we thought meant the same amount as previous year, that's not checking out right now. So we'll keep working on that. And then for federal fiscal year 26, we still don't, Congress has not passed a budget for that. That year starts October 1st, and you may have heard that there's talk of a possible government shutdown, or, the president had proposed completely cutting off our federal funds, but Congress had, in the House and the Senate, did have funding for us at level funding, or maybe 2% less, best we could tell. So again, nothing's passed. So best case scenario would probably be getting level funding. But again, we're not quite sure what level funding is, since last year's level funding doesn't look so level. So that's where we are with that. The FY26 congressional allocation, we would be planning to pull those funds down next year in July. So it wouldn't be until then that if there was a cut, that it would really affect us. So, but we're cautiously optimistic.
And I'll jump in and just add, that's the main reason we didn't have a retreat today, is because there's not enough transparency on what's coming forward with this EPA funding, and that's a big part of our budget.
It's
So,
30%.
Yeah.
So in other words, we probably won't know for another month or two at least.
That's right. And so if it does come to pass that we have some transparency on that, we'll probably look to have a retreat in November ahead of that board meeting, potentially. But we'll
Assuming Congress gets its act together by then.
That's right.
But at some point, you're gonna have to go to the fund balance if your allocation doesn't come forward.
That's right.
Correct.
Yeah. And we're always dancing around that fund balance.
Correct.
Because that goes down, and we're taking more than we put back into it, unfortunately, over the years.
Correct. And we've been meeting with Tim and the county, looking at, finance and budget, looking at scenarios, different scenarios, worst case, and contingency measures and things of that nature. So there are other, obviously Buncombe County has other departments that receive federal funding that are also impacted. So they're keeping a close eye on that and working with us to look at when the funds get drawn down and, implications of that.
A comment for Tim. Let us know when we're going to get priced out of existence.
Okay, so air quality rule amendments, Joel and I have been talking about that. Allison's done a great job, and she has drafted the rule readoption amendments that the state did a few years ago. And we are in the process of reviewing all of those. We've submitted Group 1 to the state. They've reviewed them. We've also submitted Group 2 to the state for review. I'm reviewing Group 2, and there's one of the rules in Group 2 that's a little more involved that's taken me some more time. We did put Group 1 on the board SharePoint site, the line through strikeouts, so that you guys can see those if you want to go check them out when you get time, along with a memo just explaining the different rules. A lot of these are administrative in nature and updating names of other agencies and things of that nature. Some of them are more substantial. I was planning to try to do these in batches the way that state did, where we would maybe have 2 or 3 different batches presented to this board, then go to public notice, then come back for your approval. Joel and I have figured out that it would really make more sense for us to just get everything reviewed by the state, us complete our review, get all the memos written, go ahead and keep putting it on the board SharePoint, like we said, so that you guys will have plenty of time, hoping to get everything on there in the next month. But rather than presenting these in great detail, maybe what we'll do is focus more on what is different, because a lot of these things, they are changes that we don't really have a choice but to adopt, that the state has adopted these changes. There are some that we do have some choices, and our rules are a little bit different. It's going to require some more thought, but this will be a little bit simpler. It'll also save us funds if we only do one public notice in the Citizen Times. And so, I don't know, Joel, if you have suggestions, I appreciate it.
We talked about this a lot, and I just figured there's so many amendments here that
It's over 300 rules.
it's like we'll be here for hours if we have to take them up kind of one at a time, or even in batches. So what I'd like to ask the board to do, since these will be on the SharePoint site probably within the month, maybe for all of them, potentially. If we could, if y'all could, after hours, look at them and see what you think, and then come back to the November board meeting with any questions.
I have a comment about all of them. I did look at what's on the SharePoint once James gave me access to it.
Okay.
Because I didn't have access. You got the nasty notice from the county that says you're not entitled to look at this. But that aside, what I wondered about in going through them and looking at them was how you determine what Group 1 was versus Group 2, 3, and 4. And also, aside from that, going through them and looking at the Word files of these, obvious where changes were made because of the red line in there. But I kind of wondered, other than name changes, addresses, that sort of thing, why something was new. Was it required? Was it your input, or what? In other words, why the change? So if you could incorporate something, some key or code, or instead of a red line, maybe a blue line of things that we really need to look at, it would make life a whole lot simpler, because we don't need to spend the time going into an address change somewhere. And there are a lot of that sort of thing in there. And as you just said, some things we are required to adopt, it'd be nice to know what we have a choice on and what we don't. And that might simplify the whole process, not only for us, but also when we have the public notice, if anybody should want to read through them. And some of our customers might see if their particular rules have changed. It would be a big help.
Yes, and I think there's a memo that should be, I don't know if you saw the memo, but the memo has
Summarize
kind of
what's-
summarizes the different groups. So the General Assembly passed a law a few years ago saying that all of the state agencies had to review all of their rules every few years, and they have to, basically, this was the first time it was done for the air quality rules. They had to put them in buckets. These are rules that are not really required. These are rules that are absolutely required by the federal government. These are ones we're changing with very minor changes. These are rules that we're changing that are substantive, so there's all these little buckets that they put them in, and that's how they came up with the 6 groups. Is they went through, there was 3 different buckets that they all had to be put in. And so they eliminated some of the rules that were no longer, they were kind of obsolete. For example, there was one about transportation conformity that had to do with motor vehicles and the carbon monoxide standard. The cars are so much cleaner now. That made sense in the 70s, but we didn't need it now. So that was just an example of one where they reviewed it and said, this rule is no longer needed, and it got repealed. So
I just found it a
helps,
little
but-
bit confusing as to who was commenting and doing what.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that the memos will help. And then what we're planning to do is the ones that we know our rule is different from the state. Those are the ones we would like to spend more time on, like our permit exemption rule is one of those, where the state made a change a few years ago to the emission levels that required you to have a permit, and we didn't change ours. So that's one where we want to present that fully to the board so that you can fully understand it. That's one where we're going to ask you to keep our rule. We're making some of the changes, but proposing not to make all, things like that where we know our rule is different. Those are the ones Joel and I thought would be best to focus on, that you guys would want to do a more in-depth presentation.
If when you go through these things and create your memo, at least for us, if you could put some sort of comment under a particular section that says, this differs from the state, we're keeping it because.
Yes, and
That, just a comment type of thing for us.
And I am actually doing just that, like in the 17.0200, because I am actually putting comments like that. So I think where there are differences, you will see those. And I'm
Okay.
putting them in there for the state and for me, so I remember what I did. It'll be,
Yeah.
but now that you say that, yes, it will be in there. And if it's just us adopting the same thing the state's adopting, there's not going to be an extra comment in it. But if there's,
Just where there's substantive differences.
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll save a lot of time and make the process a whole lot easier for all of us.
definitely. And it'll help us too, so that we'll remember why we did it that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you. And then, you're welcome to call me anytime if you're doing the deep dive on them in between meetings and just something is strange, feel free to call me and we can talk about it. Okay, so I think what we're hoping to do is coming back in November, we will have everything up on the SharePoint by then, and then we can maybe highlight the ones that are different. I'm hoping to be ready for that in November.
Is that the target to have the state reviews done?
Hopefully, we'll see. So I did get to participate in now I'm losing my voice again, celebration of 10 years clean air in North Carolina. That was 10 years of us meeting all the all the federal standards. And I had some pictures. James was I think he had the pictures scrolling earlier. But I did get to go to Raleigh. It was at the governor's mansion, so that was exciting. And they recognized all of us local programs, and they had a lot of past directors there and past former staff were there. We were hoping the governor would be there. We did have a video address. The secretary was supposed to be there, but he ended up getting sick and giving us a video address. But we did have some people from the secretary's office there, and those are some of the last four, the current and previous air directors there on the screen. And so it was really nice to have something positive to celebrate. And Director Aberzinski, see, that's me right behind Mike Aberzinski.
Cool.
He talked about how important it is, because when companies come to North Carolina and they want to talk about economic development, the first thing they always ask is, are we in attainment with all the national ambient air quality standards? Because that affects the standards that they have to comply with and the emissions limits that they will have. And the second question, of course, is always, how fast can I get my permit? But being in attainment is great for economic development. And a lot of people work really hard. Talked about the Clean Smokestacks Act, and they had a former secretary there that talked about the importance of, he specifically called out Western North Carolina and how important for our economy the clean air is. And I think that's because of tourism, and people want to come to the mountains and see the mountains and not see haze. So anyway, so it was really fun. I was glad I got to go. Appreciate them including us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Steve to do the monitoring update. That's the EPA building. I went and visited EPA on the way back and got some burn-wise education outreach materials for the clean burning firewood program. They're not allowed to mail us anything anymore. And so I drove by and got a box of stuff for the 2 new wood banks we have for clean burning techniques and stuff. So that was fun.
Okay. Big news since the last time we met is that we've finally gotten moved into our lab. And got a couple of pictures here James is going to show of our new accommodations. And a couple of pieces of equipment there I'm going to mention in just a minute. We've had some equipment failures recently, and so fortunately we've had spares that pick up slack, and we're working on getting those repaired. But as I said, we did have spares put in so that we would not lose data. James, go ahead and show the next picture. So that's just the other side of the room. We got plenty of storage for our equipment now, and places to store our tools and places to work on stuff. So really excited about that. And glad to finally be in there, because we were having to come down here and take stuff back and forth, and it was a difficult situation. Also wanted to mention that we're still working towards getting the AB Tech ozone site ready. We're still on track, we believe, to have that site established in December. They're going to bring the building out late December, early January. So we're hoping things keep moving. Also, one thing that Ashley mentioned briefly, we recently had a meeting about the EPA sensor loans, the purple air monitors that we've deployed throughout the county, and the state is wanting to end their portion of it with their participation in this project around a year to the time of the storm. And so we had a meeting with EPA this week to see about taking over those purple air. We thought it'd be nice to have that data available for the foreseeable future, and they were amenable to that. They have a plan to transfer that loan to us, and they were very happy to loan it to us. Actually, said they were glad it was being used, and was helpful. And so we're going to have another meeting with the state this week too to talk about the logistics of that. But should have something to report to you for the next meeting. So also want to update you on the completeness of our BAM, the 2.5 monitor. For the year, we're at right at 97% completeness. And the ozone site at Bend Creek, we're at 93%. And so got another month and a half before the end of the ozone season. And next year, we'll be running hopefully the site at AB Tech, along with bringing the toxics monitor back as part of that. It's going to go in the building too. So a lot of things happening right now. So we're hoping to deploy, well, we are going to deploy our new ozone monitors this next year too, the cube models that we've had. So that's it, unless you have questions.
Yeah, I guess our next board meeting is going to be in the new space, right?
That's the
Thank you.
plan.
So if that's the case, we want a tour of the
Yeah.
lab and all the facilities, Steve. So
Oh, that'd be great.
be prepared for that.
Yeah, I didn't get them up for James, but we do have pictures. The boardroom is looking good. The boardroom is all ready. The only thing we're waiting on is that AV equipment. It is supposed to be installed later this month. And so by November, they should have had time to test it and get it going. So we're hoping to be there in November.
Okay.
Okay, so next up is the permit renewals. There's one.
So we've got one permit renewal and we've got a modification, I believe, right? So
Yes.
I'll take it one at a time. Give us a staff report on Borg Warner. The changes are.
Okay.
That's you or James.
Normally it would be James, but I'll make an attempt at it. So, basically this is a Title V permit. It's up every 5 years, and we did make some changes to allow them to test natural gas fired combustion engines in addition to the diesel fired internal combustion engines. Other than that, it was just updating some general conditions, cleaning up the permit to take out some equipment that had been removed, and update the insignificant activity list.
Have they been in 100% compliance for the last 5 years?
Yes, they have, and we did go to public notice on this, and we did not receive any comments from the public. EPA actually reviewed this one. We have to submit these for EPA review as well. They actually reviewed this one, and they had a few little comments. Allison worked on this one with Steve, and there were a couple of rule references that needed to be updated that they caught, but nothing, it's all just really minor stuff.
How do they demonstrate compliance with these things? I was curious when I went through this. Should know, but I don't remember. How do you demonstrate compliance when there's not like a point source or the SIMS or something like that? How are they demonstrating compliance with all these things?
Well, that again, they're subject to the visible emissions rules, so we can go out and look for visible emissions. There really aren't any. Facility like this, it's similar to when you have boilers or things of that nature where we have emissions factors for natural gas or fuel oil from similar engines. And so we mainly we use emission factors. We don't require them to actually do tests like, the power plant, of course, larger power plants, of course, have to do annual tests. But a lot of these facilities where they just have internal combustion engines like emergency generators or boilers, we actually use emission factors.
You have to show PM records and things like that.
Yes.
They don't have to, with these natural gas engines and with these investment, the investment castings, I saw in one of those, really you're dependent upon the operation, operating as designed. And I'm curious what they submit to you to show that.
I wouldn't say they submit anything additional, as Ashley pointed out, where emissions based are based off of Emission factors, they do submit annual reports on their fuel usage, their natural gas, fuel oil, and gasoline for their test cells. We check those numbers to make sure that, they do have a fuel oil limit that they're not allowed to exceed. That was actually slightly modified in this application as well. Slightly lowered. It didn't have to be lowered very much with the addition of natural gas to those other test cells. But there isn't actually any physical testing of anything. We just make sure that, there are permit conditions that they have to go by in regards to maintenance and all that stuff. We check all that. But outside of that, no, there wouldn't be any additional checks.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the Borg Warner permit?
I move we approve the permit.
Anybody?
Second.
And move in a second. Get that, Allison? Any further comments? If none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the renewal.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, and the next one's Pratt and Whitney, I believe, right?
Yes. So this was a modification, and this is an example of, we issue the permit based on the equipment that the facility is planning to install. And then once they install and start operating the equipment or get closer to installing it, we have modified this permit a few times now, just to tighten up the details. This particular process, it's a coating process, and that's always complicated with air quality because coatings change and formulations of coatings change. And the way the rules are written, you don't have to get a modification every time your coating changes. But in this case, there was the coating that they were actually using had a toxic air pollutant in it that was not part of the original formulation that they submitted. And so they had to do North Carolina air toxics modeling for this process. And since the coating that they actually are going to use now contains a pollutant, or we call it a TAP, toxic air pollutant, hydrogen fluoride, that was not part of the original application, they had to update the air dispersion modeling. And we did have to open the permit to do that, and also included a requirement to track the amount of this activator coating that they use. There's a limit basically that we put in the permit when we updated it for this modification. So James, did I miss anything there?
Nope, nothing missed. To slightly clarify, I guess, that it's hydrogen fluoride is the pollutant. It was part of the original coating. It's just that they miscalculated how much they were going to use in a 24-hour period. So there's nothing fundamentally changing about the main part of the permit. They're already permitted for this process, but as Ashley explained, they went above the toxics permitting emission level or rate. They had to do modeling on that. So the only thing that really changed in the permit was at the very end of the permit, we list the parameters that are involved with the modeling. And so that kind of holds them to that if they say it's a 25-foot stack, it has to be a 25-foot stack. If they say that the process rate which they applied for has to match that process rate. And like Ashley also said, there's going to be, we're going to have them do a log of the amount of activator they use in a 24-hour period to make sure it does not exceed what they've modeled for.
Got a question for Ashley. Since this is a case where they're essentially changing their compound or using more of it or whatever, do our rules, or will our modified rules cover situations like this better than they do now? Just
No,
something
it's-
to think about.
No, it's one of those things where you can't tell if this, well, we have never, the current rules don't consider changing coding formulation changes to be permit modifications.
But should they is the case. Do we need to add something to the rules specifying when you need permit modification, if
Some-
possible.
That's not really possible unless the way that our rules and the interlocal is written, a local program would have to have their local sponsor, essentially City of Asheville and Buncombe County, and this board would all have to agree that that needed to be done. Then we would have to go to Raleigh and present that to the Environmental Management Commission and explain why our area requires something special and more stringent. And they would have to approve it. So I don't think I don't see that happening. I mean, it is something where if a coding formulation does change, we do get updates on that because facilities do have to report regularly and we do track emissions annually. So I don't think that it's been a real problem, because if we see that happen, we can ask the facility, hey, we think we need to modify your permit or something of that nature.
Yeah, well,
I mean, I think it's a good question, but
I'm just asking, is there something we can do to kind of narrow down this big hole? I don't know offhand, but something you might want to think about when you go through those rules.
Well,
Not,
yeah.
a major change that's going to require approval from the world.
Is this something that Pratt and Whitney brought to our attention, or is it something that we as agency staff discovered?
they brought it to our attention. However, it is in the permit because the modeling parameters are really what makes it enforceable. So in the permit, we actually put, this is the emission rate they modeled at. This is the stack height of the stack. This is the location of the stack. So by documenting all that in the permit, they are required to notify us if it changes. And so they notified us as they're required to. So I think in this case, it went well as it
process
should
worked.
have. It worked. I
It
think
worked,
so.
okay.
I think it's a good question though, Ned, because it's always problematic that coding formulations can change. When a facility is over, we call it the TPER, the toxic pollutant emission rate requiring a permit. When a facility is over a certain threshold level, we put this detail in the permit with the modeling. However, if the facility was under what we call the TPER, they wouldn't have all this extra modeling parameters in the permit. And then if they did change coatings, it would be a little different, but we would still catch it on an annual basis. And I think that we do have something, there's a catch-all. It's called director's discretion. It's not the word, but there is a director call where if we see something problematic like that would not be already spelled out in the permit, we can actually require a facility
Yeah.
to do modeling, for example.
Yeah, but that's when you're aware of it. Not every company is going to make you aware of it.
Well, they are required to submit annually all their usages, updated MSDSs, and so I think that, we would catch something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, I think there's been a lot of debate about that. It is definitely something that's, I think, that has been on the radar.
Okay, any other questions? Entertain a motion.
Move to approve the permit modification for RTX Corporation, Pratt & Whitney.
Second.
Second by Ned, a motion by Carl. Any other questions, discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay. You're off the clock. The director's report is pretty long. All right, no new business today, and other business, Amy, any legal counsel reporting? Advisory committee hasn't met.
Nope.
Since the last board meeting, so no report there. As far as the calendar goes, our next meeting's scheduled for November 13th. I may not be here that week. And so I was talking to Ashley, it's okay if I'm not here because Carl is definitely capable in my absence as vice chair. But I was thinking maybe to move the board meeting to the next week, November 20th. That's the week before Thanksgiving week. Anybody have any opinion about any of that?
Let's see, we're going to be looking at permit, or we're looking at rules modifications. It would probably be good for you to be here.
Okay.
Making that, so I'll
Move to the 20th.
You guys okay with the 20th?
As far as I know now.
All right. All right. We'll let us know if that doesn't work, but we'll plan on the 20th being the,
You need a motion or anything for that, or you can just do that?
I think we could just do that. We've done that in the past, haven't we?
Yeah, since you're in an open session, you can, as long as everybody agrees, you can make that change.
Yeah, everybody's okay with it. And then if the retreat makes sense, we would do that the hour before the meeting at 3 o'clock. So that will work. Any announcements? And I didn't see anybody sign up for public comment. There's nobody on there, right? Okay. Therefore, we've gotten to an adjournment. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion.
Motion by Gary, second by Carl. We'll do it that way. All those in favor say aye.
All right.
All right, we're adjourned.